I'm a simple Marine. I want to know why what happened in Myanmar can't happen here.
You know, no reason. I mean, it should happen here. No reason. That's right.
That was Donald Trump's short-lived national security advisor, Michael Flynn, answering a question by a QAnon conspiracy theorist at a QAnon conspiracy gathering regarding a Myanmar-style military coup in the United States to install Donald Trump or reinstate Donald Trump as the president of the United States. His comments, again, were made during this QAnon conference in Dallas, Texas, and the conference was titled, "For God and Country, Patriot Roundup." Now, Ryan, I want you to jump in right away because this is very clearly calling for a pretty horrific coup in order to undo our democratic election and install Donald Trump, their preferred president, in the White House. And of course, now Michael Flynn is walking back his statements. But before we get to that, I wanted to get your thoughts.
Right. I mean, the QAnon kind of philosophy, or whatever you want to call it, calls to be straight up executed in a violent uprising. They are considered the worst kinds of traitors on the planet, and the best way to deal with them is to slaughter them. Flynn talking about a violent coup in Myanmar as appropriate to bring here is almost a tame version of what QAnon actually calls for. Flynn has been dabbling in and kind of immersed in the more bonkers elements of the Trumpist wing of the party for a very long time, and this kind of shows how far he has gone. You see coups take place all over the world, and usually you find that the United States is somehow involved with those coups, and you wonder sometimes, how is it that so many people in these countries can support undermining their own government like this? And hearing the crowd cheer Michael Flynn like that, it shows you that it absolutely could happen here, and it would have support if it did happen here. Now, this is a marginal group. I don't think that they're anywhere remotely close to operationalizing anything like this. But at one point, he was national security advisor, and at some point, it's quite likely that Republicans will be back in the White House, and that wing of the party is going to remain part of it.
With every presidential election cycle, the Republican Party tends to get more and more extreme in what they're willing to do in regard to voter suppression, how far they're willing to go in order to ensure they maintain power. During the same event, Flynn also falsely claimed that, quote, Trump won. He won the popular vote, which of course he did not, and he won the Electoral College vote. So he's helping to perpetuate this lie, the big lie about the 2020 election. And so, I really enjoyed the podcast episode you did on Deconstructed, where you talked to Lauren Windsor, and she made a really great point about how all of these lies regarding the 2020 election isn't really about reversing the results of the 2020 general election. It's more about getting the Republican ducks in a row for 2022 and 2024. And I think that she's right about that. But there's also the fact that democracy is incredibly fragile. Our democracy is incredibly fragile. And I think that this past election made it abundantly clear to me that there is a pretty significant portion of the country that's willing to throw out our democratic process in order to ensure that their preferred candidate maintains power. And I'm really worried about what that means for the future, because for anyone who might have missed the awful coup that took place in Myanmar, it happened in February. We did cover it on this show, so please check out that video to get more details on it. But the coup d'etat deposed the democratically elected government and installed a military leader as ruler. A violent crackdown followed that has reportedly killed more than 600 people and wounded thousands. As I mentioned, Flynn did get a considerable amount of backlash as a result of his comments. So now he's trying to pretend as if he was taken out of context and he didn't really say what he clearly said in the video that we showed you. He said, quote, "Let me be very clear, there is no reason whatsoever for any coup in America, and I do not and have not at any time called for any action of that sort." But as we know, he responded to a person who said, "Why can't we have a Myanmar type coup here in the United States?" And he's like, "There's no reason we can't." There's no other way to take that out of context or twist his words.
Right, and you're right that Lauren's made an interesting point, because it shows how the party's kind of moving on two tracks at the same time. Like, on the one hand, they're squarely playing the electoral politics game. They're gonna do a lot of gerrymandering. They're working on rewriting voter laws to advantage themselves. And they have figured out when at night and when on the weekends and when during the process Democrats were more likely to vote, and they kind of stripped those times away just to try to tilt closer to this big lie. Because the huge variable is will the voters who came out for Donald Trump in 2020, who didn't even come out for Trump in 2016, will they show up in 2022 in a midterm? And what about the voters who showed up for Trump in 2016 but hadn't shown up for Democrats before? Republicans don't know, Democrats don't know, nobody knows if those people are going to show up. And so what they're doing is kind of stoking as much paranoia as they can to show that they are firmly behind their man Trump. And if you like Trump, then you should come out and support these Republicans in this midterm election. So it's not clear if that's going to work, but that's their electoral politics game. At the same time, like she said, they're also sowing the seeds for a full-blown overturning of a legitimate election in the future. Because if you can convince your voters that 2020 was in fact stolen, then even if it seems gray to people in 2024 whether or not it was actually stolen or not, people will feel aggrieved by 2020 and say, you know what, payback is fair. Mm-hmm. So we're gonna pay them back for stealing it in 2020. In fact, Republicans believed for decades that 1960 was stolen by Kennedy. The evidence, I think it was like they probably did, illegally flip enough votes in 1960 to flip that. And in 2000, when Republicans stole that one, mm-hmm. you had plenty of Republicans who had living memory of 1960 and were like, "This is payback. You earned this." Now we're in a much more compressed time period, and it's not the old school style of stealing an election like Lyndon Johnson, stuffing some ballot boxes in Texas, or the Democratic machine in Chicago, coming up with some extra boxes. They're talking about just wholesale invalidating entire electoral college results.
It's absolute madness. And for his part, Michael Flynn has also suggested all sorts of insane things, including calling for martial law in order to ensure that Donald Trump maintains power. Last summer, Flynn posted a video featuring QAnon slogans. In a recent interview, Flynn attempted to distinguish between the QAnon movement, which is known for outlandish conspiracy theories, and its followers, saying, "What I tell people to do is look at the people that are involved, look at the values that they espouse, and let's move along." But the values they espouse is supporting a military coup in order to ensure that their preferred candidate remains in power. And what I'm worried about, Ryan, isn't just the lunacy coming from the right wing, but more importantly, the reaction and response from the Democratic Party, because we don't have a Democratic machine that's reminiscent of the Chicago Democrats or any. There's no. I don't see any strength in pushing back against what we're seeing in regard to the Republican Party and what they're spreading in terms of disinformation about the 2020 election. Just today, Joe Biden, while out with Kamala Harris, claimed that he's gonna fight like hell to ensure that these voter suppression laws in various states are mitigated, but there's really no game plan. I haven't seen any type of game plan, and in the Senate, as you know, we have conservative Democratic senators like Joe Manchin who are unwilling to do away with the filibuster, which is obviously necessary in order to pass election reform. So what are Democrats going to do?
I mean, everything depends on really the month of June for Democrats, and but you're right. The asymmetry is just wild. You have one party that's the one party that's not ostensibly in federal power, that is using what power it does have to tilt all the rules in its favor, and then you have the other party that is ostensibly in power who is doing nothing about it. Yes, like you said, they passed HR 1 in the House. They've passed it through committee in the Senate. That bill would ban gerrymandering. It would overturn a bunch of these voter suppression laws that have already been passed. It would effectively make it impossible for them to pass them in these other states where they're pushing them. It can't get through right now because of the filibuster, and so June is as far as a lot of kind of the deadline to get this done in time so that it can be implemented in time for the 2022 midterms. And so Democrats are setting up a ton of showdowns over the filibuster. They're going to vote on next week, I think, the Paycheck Fairness Act, which Democrats all like, and Republicans are going to filibuster. They're dragging out these infrastructure talks to show that Republicans aren't serious about negotiating around infrastructure. Fortunately for Democrats, Shelley Moore Capito, a Republican from West Virginia, is the one who's taking the lead on these infrastructure negotiations. So if and when that blows up, they will have cut the knees out from under Joe Manchin's friend back in West Virginia. And so each time that Republicans filibuster something, the intent there is to get Joe Manchin a little bit closer to agreeing to reform the filibuster. And Schumer has said he's going to have a vote on S1, HR 1 at the end of June. Now, this is all long shot stuff. You're relying on Joe Manchin to do the right thing, but the pieces are lined up. And if they go down, and 10 years from now, you would look back and you would reasonably say that June 2021 was the moment that they had a shot to stay in the ball game and blew it. Or if they get it done, you say June 2021 is the moment that Democrats actually found their spine.
Well, we'll see what happens in June. I have my own predictions, but I'll hold.
Yeah, the smart money is never on Democrats finding a spot. That's for sure.
Exactly. Well,
anything's possible.
Anything's possible. Yes.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.